Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking one of the most iconic, lore-heavy, and frankly coolest-looking units in the Space Marine arsenal, the Primaris Repulsor. And we are putting it through the industrial meat grinder of competitive play. We are stripping away all the flowery narrative fluff, the descriptions of raw brute force and tremendous motive power, and we are going to look at its cold, hard statistical value.
Right, and specifically, we're looking at it after the dust settled on that critically important December 2025 balanced data slate. That update changed everything.
It really did.
That's absolutely right. Our mission today is a full Mathhammer technical audit. We need to reconstruct the Repulsor not as this glorious anti-grav tank of the Imperium, but as a statistical entity.
Defined by numbers.
Exactly. Defined entirely by its logistical overhead, its probability curves, and, most importantly, its competitive position within the current meta. We need to definitively determine if this 10th edition chassis justifies its cost and its precious slot in a top-tier 2,000-point army list.
Exactly. So for you, the learner tuning in, we've got a mountain of cutting-edge competitive analysis and technical reconstruction reports, all focused on these 10th edition operational parameters. This isn't about how cool the hover tank looks. No. It's about whether it wins games. We are going to find the true role of the Repulsor because, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert, the flavor text on the box often does not match the cold, harsh numbers on the datasheet.
Not even close.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the ultimate metric of competitive value, which is always the points cost.
Always.
And what that cost buys you in terms of raw durability.
To understand the true worth of any unit in this environment, we have to establish what we call the Rosetta Stone of competitive analysis.
What's points cost?
The points cost, as codified in the Munitorum field manual. This number, it establishes the unit's efficiency reality. And following that December 2025 update, we saw the strategic rebalancing across the entire Space Marine vehicle index. It was a huge shakeup.
And what's fascinating here is the relative change, or I guess the lack of change for the standard Repulsor.
Right. The
Repulsor Executioner, the dedicated gun platform variant, the one that players historically relied on for big damage, that received a pretty significant point increase.
A huge one. It was just deemed too efficient at damage dealing for its existing cost. The numbers were too good.
But the standard Repulsor, the one we are focusing on, it stayed relatively stable. It's kind of parked between 180 and 190 points.
And that's the key. When its more lethal sibling, the Executioner, gets significantly more expensive, it jumped close to 240 points.
Wow.
The relative value of the standard Repulsor automatically increases. Its opportunity cost against its own peers has fundamentally improved without the Repulsor even changing a single bolt.
That shift forces us to look immediately at the chassis efficiency. We have to ask the question, for those 180, 190 points, how many wounds and how much toughness or T are you actually getting?
It's time for the comparative points audit. Let's put the Repulsor in context using its two primary competitive foils. The classic Land Raider and the dedicated anti-tank unit, the Gladiator Lancer.
Okay, so the Land Raider, the historical heavy assault transport, that thing costs, 240 plus points now?
At least, yeah.
And the Gladiator Lancer is a much tighter 160 points. Our Repulsor, as you said, sits firmly in the middle at 180.
Right. But when you break that down into the critical metric of points per wound, the results are stark, and they immediately challenge a lot of conventional wisdom.
Let's run the numbers. The Land Raider, everyone knows it's tough. It's got 16 wounds. But at 240 points, that's a high rate.
It comes out to 15.00 points per wound. 15 points for every single point of damage it can take.
Okay, 15. Now, the Gladiator Lancer, it's lighter. So 12 wounds at 160 points, that's a bit better.
A little better. It's 13.33 points per wound. So you're already seeing a trend.
Now the Repulsor.
Now look at the standard Repulsor. With its full 16 wounds at 180 points, it drops dramatically to only 11.25 points per wound. This statistical conclusion is immediate, and it's crucial. The Repulsor offers significantly more raw durability per point invested than the Land Raider. You are getting a mathematically more efficient, durable chassis for less cost.
Wait, hang on. I would have assumed the Land Raider, just because it's this iconic behemoth, would be the most points-efficient source of durability. But the numbers suggest the exact opposite.
They do.
We're talking about a difference of almost 4 points per wound. That efficiency gap, that 3.75 points per wound over 16 wounds, that saves you 60 points on the table compared to the Land Raider.
60 points.
That's a full Primaris Techmarine you get to purchase somewhere else in your list.
Precisely. That Land Raider cost, it's clearly paying for its added lethality and its specific utility, which is the assault ramp. We'll definitely talk about that later. But purely as a durable block of stats, the Repulsor wins the efficiency test hands down. This is the definition of a value-optimized chassis.
This leads us directly to what the reports call the Premium Asset Threshold Test. We need to establish what its actual role is.
Right, so this test establishes what constitutes a viable main battle tank or MBT profile in the current meta. We generally define that as a unit costing over 200 points and possessing toughness 10 or higher.
And the Repulsor, at 180 points, technically falls below that cost threshold.
It does.
But it significantly exceeds the toughness threshold, T12, 16 wounds. This is the core of his competitive identity, isn't it?
It is, 100%. By exceeding the toughness requirement while falling below the cost threshold of an MBT, the Repulsor immediately avoids the strategic pitfalls of being labeled a glass cannon or a high-risk tech piece.
It's not fragile.
Not at all. It is formally established as a stat-check durability asset. It is not designed to kill the enemy. It is fundamentally designed to endure the enemy's best attempts to kill it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Toughness forensics. The T12 metric is, as our sources call it, the defining non-negotiable factor of its survivability.
T12 is the single most important statistical defense the Repulsor possesses. In 10th edition, the wound chart has these critical breakpoints, and T12 is the final major wall that separates general anti-tank from dedicated anti-Titan weaponry.
So it's a huge jump.
A huge jump. T12 forces high-strength weapons to hit key wounding thresholds, and that dramatically reduces the opponent's incoming damage efficiency.
Look at this specific breakpoint analysis, because this explains what people call the unit's zombie factor. Like, take a common, high-volume threat, a Strength 6 heavy bolter, or even a Strength 7 weapon from a common light vehicle.
Okay, so against a T9 or T10 vehicle, which accounts for most medium transports and light tanks, that S6 weapon wounds on a 5+ can't, the attacker has a 1 in 3 chance of succeeding.
33%, standard stuff.
But against the Repulsor's T12, that wound roll shifts to a 6+N.
A 6.
A 6. That's a 50% reduction in successful wounds from a vast category of common threat profiles. You have effectively halved the damage output of an entire section of the enemy's armory just by hitting that T12 number.
And if you scale that up to the primary anti-tank workhorses, the S12 weapons like the Las-talon, the data is even more compelling.
It is. The S12 Las-talon is the gold standard of anti-tank fire. It's designed to wound almost every heavy target efficiently. Against a T10 or T11 vehicle, think a Gladiator Lancer or a Redemptor Dreadnought S12 wounds on a 3+ state.
2 in 3 chance. Very reliable.
Highly reliable. But against the Repulsor's T12, the attacker is forced back to a 4+ to wound.
A 4+ state. That is a monumental statistical shift.
Yep.
You move from being wounded 66% of the time to being wounded 50% of the time, just for crossing that 180-point threshold.
It's an entire wound roll shift that costs you only about 20 points more than a Lancer. I mean, the source material quantifies the specific advantage. The Repulsor gains approximately 25% to 33% more survivability against high-end anti-tank fire compared to T10, T11 vehicles.
This is not a subtle advantage. It's a massive strategic differential that forces your opponent to completely rethink their target priority. So if you're looking purely for a durable, non-Land Raider chassis to anchor the midboard or to perform objective checks, the 180-point T12 Repulsor is mathematically the superior purchase over a Land Raider and significantly tougher than a Gladiator. Okay, we've established it's a phenomenal brick wall.
It is.
But the obvious next question is, does that durability come at the expense of its guns? Let's talk about the reports on lethality.
We shift now from defense to offense. And to be considered an S-tier asset, a truly dominant, must-take force on the battlefield, a unit must pass what we call the Trifactor test.
Durability, lethality, and scoring.
Exactly. Durability, lethality, and scoring.
We've established that the durability check is a resounding pass. 16 wounds, toughness 12. It forces a disproportionate resource commitment. Even highly effective anti-tank weapons need multiple rounds of concentrated fire to take this thing down.
For sure. The scoring check is also a clear pass. The Repulsor possesses an objective control characteristic, or OC, of 5.
And for listeners who might be new to this, OC is what determines control of an objective marker. An OC of 5 is significant because it can single-handedly challenge a point held by many common infantry units that usually have OC 1 or 2.
And don't forget that massive transport capacity of 14 models is a scoring multiplier.
Right. You can safely deliver high OC units like a full squad of intercessors or heavy scoring units like eradicators directly onto a central objective without them being shot off the board during deployment or the early move.
Exactly. The Repulsor is a T12 scoring element that delivers more scoring elements, so it passes 2/3 of the test. Which brings us to the lethality check.
And this is where it all falls apart.
Where the reconstruction reports firmly state the unit fails. Hard.
This is where that narrative of a deadly combination of maneuverability and raw brute force just utterly collapses under the weight of dice math. It's a beautifully armed chassis. I mean, it's covered in guns, but its ability to generate high, reliable damage against armored targets is catastrophically low.
Let's dive into the Mathhammer forensics on the firepower to understand why. We need to look at the weapon breakpoint analysis.
So the Repulsor's main guns are the twin Las-cannon on the hull, that's strength 12, and the turret-mounted Las-talon, which is only strength 10.
And that's the first problem. The S12 twin Las-cannon is our true anti-tank element. It's the only weapon that wounds T12 targets on that crucial 4+10. The S10 Las-talon, however, is classified as an elite hunter weapon. It's designed for targets like Terminators at T5 or light vehicles at T7 or T8.
So that S10 is a major weakness against the modern meta's main battle tanks and heavy monsters, which are all sitting solidly at T12.
It's a huge weakness. That S10 Las-talon wounds a T12 target on a 5+10. That means 2/3 of your wound rolls with that weapon are just failing. That is highly inefficient.
And then you have the bulk of the firepower, this consolidated repulsor defensive array, which is just all the other little guns, right?
Yeah, the myriad stubbers, heavy bolters, and storm bolters. This array is mostly strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Against a heavy infantry unit like a Marine squad in cover, which maintains a 3+ save, this defensive array is a bounce weapon. It generates statistically negligible damage.
It's just noise.
It is just noise. It's only effective at clearing the very lightest of infantry screens.
The sources quantified this lethality failure with some pretty hard damage numbers against the premier meta benchmark. Let's take a T12 Chaos Knight, a target you absolutely must be able to deal with on the midboard.
Okay, so using the standard anti-tank loadout, the twin Las-cannon, which is S12 and twin-linked, which helps reliability a bit, and the S10 Las-talon, the Repulsor, generates, on average, only about 3.57 damage per round against that knight.
Less than 4 wounds.
Less than 4 wounds against a unit that typically has over 20 wounds and often has access to healing or feel no pain saves.
So if the enemy knight needs 3 or 4 turns of dedicated anti-tank fire to take out your Repulsor needs something like 7 turns to take out the knight.
At least. It's a fundamentally asymmetric fight that the Repulsor is demonstrably not designed to win on its own. It cannot trade up. It can't.
You can even see it with the Rhino test.
We can. A common benchmark against a light transport, just T9 and 10 wounds. The Repulsor fails to reliably destroy even that in a single shooting phase. It manages only about 7.0 to 8.0 to damage on average.
So it leaves it on 1 or 2 wounds?
Every time. Therefore, the competitive assessment officially strips the Repulsor of its tank hunter title. It is reclassified as a suppressive hybrid, or, more accurately, an armored taxi with sidearms.
But it's the sheer unreliability of the damage that creates the most strategic risk. And the source material calls this the volatility penalty. This is what makes players lose games.
The penalty is rooted in the damage profile of its primary high-strength weapons. The Las-talon and the twin Las-cannon both use D6+1 for damage. This creates extreme variance. For every successful hit and wound, you can roll a minimum of 2 damage or a maximum of 7 damage. That is a massive spread of 5 damage points.
And in a game of small margins, rolling a 1 for damage can lose you the game.
Oh, absolutely. In competitive play, relying on variance is strategic malpractice. There is a calculated 16.6% chance, 1 in 6, of rolling a 1 for damage.
So if you have a wounded vehicle that needs, say, 4 wounds to be finished off, and your Las-talon hits and wounds,
that 16.6% chance of rolling a 1 means you only deal 2 damage, the target survives, and it potentially kills one of your key units on the swing back. This casino cannon effect makes the unit strategically unstable when guaranteed target removal is what you need to win the game.
So we have a magnificent, resilient T12 armored bus that is mathematically inefficient at killing armored targets. The critical question for the next section becomes, is that combination an efficiency or a burden? Does the hybrid tax outweigh the obvious value in the chassis?
This is where we conduct the hybrid tax calculation. We need to determine if the Repulsor's dual role providing basic fire support combined with high-capacity transport makes it a shrewd efficiency play or just a logistical burden that eats into your points budget.
We established that the Land Raider chassis is fundamentally overpriced for its durability at 15 points per wound. The Repulsor is much more efficient at 11.25. But let's look at the component parts, as the sources suggest, and kind of build a theoretical equivalent.
Right. If we were to build this unit from scratch, we start with a dedicated gun platform. The Repulsor's firepower is a little weaker than a Gladiator Lancer, which is 160 points, but let's use that 160 as a base for its offensive contribution.
Okay, 160 for the guns. Then we add the transport component. A light transport like the Impulsor is 80 points, but it's only T9. It carries, what, 7 models?
Only 7 models. The Repulsor carries double that capacity, 14 models, and is T12. That level of enhanced durability and capacity, scaled up, would surely cost significantly more than an Impulsor, maybe. 120 points just for the transport element and the T12 chassis upgrade.
So if we combine a Lancer-like lethality base, 160 points, with a robust T12 transport base, let's say a minimum of 120 points, the theoretical total cost for this hybrid unit should be somewhere around 280 points. Even being generous and saying the firepower is only worth 100 points, we still land at 220.
But the Repulsor costs a flat 180 to 190 points. This reveals that the player is receiving a substantial discount for the combined role. The designers have priced this chassis based on its median performance, and they've discounted it heavily because of that low, volatile lethality we just talked about.
That's a key piece of information. The conclusion is that the cost is mathematically justified. The Repulsor is a value-optimized chassis because the player receives T12 durability, 14 transport capacity, and a phenomenal utility ability, all at a significant discount compared to buying the separate components.
But, and this is a huge but, that value only holds up if the player utilizes both the transport function and the durability. If you run it as a purely offensive tank, you are wasting the points and the chassis slot.
Right. Before we get to its defining feature, the one thing it does better than almost any other vehicle, let's quickly reinforce the weapon loadout dilemma, as this affects how you utilize that hybrid chassis.
There are two main turret options that define the hybrid approach. Option A is the Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon, the HOGC. It's strength 6, 12 shots, damage 1. It's an excellent horde clearer.
But it has a hidden benefit.
It does. Its critical feature is the ability to generate mortal wounds via the devastating wounds rule in specific configurations.
That allows it to chip damage off ridiculously tough targets, like C-TAN or units with strong, invulnerable saves, bypassing the need to wound or save entirely. That's a subtle but important benefit in a unit that struggles with high-toughness targets.
And option B is the Las-talon. S10, 2 shots, D6 plus 1. As we covered, it's fundamentally inefficient in the T12 meta.
So the advice is?
The standing competitive advice remains that the hull-mounted twin Las cannon, which is S12, 1 shot, D6 plus 1, and possesses twin-linked, is generally the superior anti-tank choice. You have to leverage that S12 breakpoint, and the reroll from twin-linked helps mitigate that volatility penalty just slightly.
Okay, let's talk about movement efficiency and the Repulsor's overall strategic movement utility. This chassis is a great shooter delivery system.
It is. The Repulsor's base movement is 10 inches. In terms of delivery value, it provides that 10-inch move plus a 3-inch disembark range, giving any unit inside a total 13-inch immediate threat range increase over infantry moving on foot.
So that's more than doubling their threat range.
It represents a 116% increase in threat range for the embarked units. You are projecting power across the board rapidly.
And when you compare the cost efficiency of that move to the Land Raider, which costs 60 points more for the same 10-inch move, it wins again.
Oh, yeah. The Repulsor is 25.7 points per inch of extra movement, while the Land Raider is 34.2 points per inch.
So it's a demonstrably superior shooting delivery system.
It is. But we must pause here for a critical limitation. It fails miserably as a melee delivery system because it lacks the Land Raider's iconic assault ramp capability.
Right, no charging after moving.
Exactly. An embarked unit cannot charge after the Repulsor has moved. This dictates that you must exclusively put high-output shooting units inside. Hellblasters, aggressors, eradicators, or desolation squads.
Okay, here's where the unit earns its competitive keep, entirely separate from its points cost or its volatile guns. This is the Repulsor's defining hidden stat: Emergency Combat Embarkation.
This ability is unparalleled in the current Astartes Index. It provides a form of tactical denial that disrupts an entire phase of the enemy's turn. It's an activation denial tool disguised as a transport rule.
Let's nail down the mechanism because the timing is everything. The source material specifies that this ability triggers once per turn in the opponent's charge phase.
Correct. And crucially, it triggers after the opponent has selected the targets for their charge, but before they make the actual charge move.
So they've already committed.
They have committed. What you do is park a high-value, fragile, or anti-melee infantry unit like Hellblasters or Eradicators within 3 inches of the repulsor. Your opponent, sensing blood, declares a charge on those Eradicators. Before they move an inch, the repulsor uses the ability, and the Eradicators immediately embark inside the transport. They vanish into the T-12 hull.
And the enemy unit is now faced with what our sources term the charge denial loop. The target they intended to engage is gone.
Just gone. They must either redirect their charge into the massively durable T-12 repulsor hull, which is the suboptimal target, or they fail the charge entirely if the repulsor wasn't also a valid target.
Let's walk through a critical tactical scenario, dealing with a melee army like World Eaters. Say a full unit of 8-bound declares a charge against your key Eradicators.
Okay, so if you use Combat Embarkation, the 8-bound have wasted their entire movement and charge activation. They are now stranded in the mid-board, likely facing a free round of shooting next turn.
That saves you 150 points of Eradicators and wastes 300-plus points of enemy melee threat. I mean, the look on the opponent's face when you do this must be priceless. They've lost an entire activation and their momentum is shattered.
The strategic impact cannot be overstated. This provides an unparalleled layer of safety for your most expensive shooting units, effectively granting them extra turns of shooting by completely blanking the enemy's charge phase against them.
It's all about tempo.
It is. This control over the tempo of the game, that is, controlling when and where engagements happen, is worth far more than the 3.57 average damage the Las-talon generates. The repulsor is a T-12 safe space.
It's a genius piece of design that leverages the rules for tactical advantage. We've defined the vehicle as a discounted durable taxi focused on tempo control. Now we need to investigate how to overcome its primary flaw, that low, volatile lethality, through external synergy factors and detachments.
Since the repulsor's inherent shooting is weak, we have to mitigate that weakness through external factors. The first and most critical synergy is the leader factor. Our sources suggest that a Primaris Techmarine, which is a mere 55 points, is mandatory for this chassis.
Mandatory is a strong word.
Mandatory is the right word. The Techmarine provides the blessing of the Aunt Messiah, which grants the repulsor +1 to hit. This is a massive boost to reliability, especially for the unit's best anti-tank weapon.
Right, because the twin las-cannon is hitting on a 3+ cane. That +1 to hit changes it to a 2+ cane.
Correct. When you run the numbers again, that +1 to hit increases the reliability of the twin las-cannon from 66.6% to 83.3%. You are minimizing the strategic risk of the repulsor's best anti-tank shot, ensuring it's hitting far more often.
Plus the healing.
Plus, the Techmarine can heal the vehicle D3 wounds per turn, which synergizes perfectly with the T12 durability, enhancing that zombie factor we talked about.
And if you push this further into the Ironstorm Spearhead detachment, a Techmarine with the target augury web enhancement provides a powerful aura of lethal hits. This changes the calculus entirely for the secondary weaponry.
This is a crucial breakthrough for the repulsor's overall contribution. This is where the weakness of the defensive array, all those S4 AP0 shots, is partially overcome. Lethal hits allow a successful hit roll of a 6 to auto wound, regardless of toughness.
So even though your S4 weapon only wounds a T12 Knight on a 6+ T-straw, if you rolled a 6 to hit, that weapon auto wounds, bypassing the T12 toughness wall entirely.
Precisely. If we look at the repulsor's defensive array, we're talking about 18 shots of S4 firepower. Normally, these shots are useless against T12, but with lethal hits, 18 shots multiplied by a 1 in 6 chance to score a 6 means you are generating, on average, 3 auto wounds per turn against that knight.
Just from the little gun.
Just from the defensive array alone. And that 3 wounds of damage is often more damage than the volatile Las-talon generates on its own.
It turns the repulsor into a legitimate, if low-grade, threat to heavy armor, simply through synergy and volume of fire. That synergy is essential.
And we also need to consider basic stratagem utility. The repulsor has the vehicle and smoke keywords, unlocking high-utility defensive stratagems that further leverage its durability.
Smoke for 1 command point, 1 CP, grants stealth. That means the enemy has to subtract 1 from their hit rolls against the repulsor.
This is critical because the repulsor lacks a native invulnerable save. If your opponent is forced to hit on 4s instead of 3s, they lose a full 33% of their successful hits before we even calculate the wounds. Combine that with the inherent difficulty of wounding T12, and the time to kill this chassis increases exponentially.
The lack of an invulnerable save does make it vulnerable to high AP weapons, but its 3+ save is manageable, especially with the mandatory use of Armor of Contempt, or AOC, against high AP fire.
Correct. AOC, which costs 1 CP, effectively reduces the AP of incoming fire by 1. For instance, if an opponent hits you with a high-strength, high-AP weapon like an AP4 Brightlance, your 3+ save is normally pushed to a 7+ save, meaning you fail every save.
You have no save.
No save. By using AOC, you restore that save to a 6+ save. This, combined with the 16 wound pool, means the Repulsor is mathematically more resilient than some lower wound 2+ save units, solidifying its stat check durability rating. It's expensive for the opponent to shoot it, and you have stratagems to make it even more tedious.
Now, let's detail the optimal detachment protocols, because the Repulsor is not designed to be run in a vacuum. Its competitive niche depends entirely on the environment it operates within.
The two optimal deployments for maximizing the chassis are the Firestorm Assault Force and the Ironstorm Spearhead. These are the two lanes where the Repulsor thrives.
Okay, starting with the Firestorm Assault Force. This provides optimal synergy for the offensive side of the Repulsor's hybrid profile, the side we identified as being weak.
The key rule here is the detachment's ability to grant weapons +1 strength within 12 inches. The moment that rule activates, the Repulsor becomes noticeably more lethal. That S10 Las-talon becomes S11.
And what does that do?
While S11 still wounds T12 on a 5+9, it now wounds T10 vehicles on a 3+ instead of a 4+ fine. You just crossed another critical breakpoint for a primary anti-vehicle weapon, enabling the Repulsor to better deal with enemy medium armor like Dreadnoughts and Lancer equivalents.
And the Burning Vengeance stratagem creates a powerful deterrent that perfectly leverages the Repulsor's 14 model transport capacity.
This is the counterpunch. Imagine transporting 6 aggressors, a powerful short-range unit that occupies 12 slots to the midboard. The Repulsor gets shot at, maybe loses a few wounds. The opponent thought they were just dealing with a T12 hull.
But they were wrong.
But because of Burning Vengeance, the aggressors immediately jump out and shoot back, turning the Repulsor into a highly reactive mobile gun platform that punishes the opponent for engaging it. It's an armored wasp nest strategy.
Moving on to the Ironstorm Spearhead, this attachment focuses less on the volume of fire and more on mitigating that volatility penalty we discussed earlier.
Ironstorm provides the Armored Wrath rule, which is a single free reroll to hit, wound, or damage roll per unit. This is critical for the Repulsor's low shot count D6 damage weapon.
So you roll damage for your D6 +1 twinless cannon shot, you spike a 1.
You can use that reroll to guarantee a better result, directly mitigating the casino cannon risk. It transforms a volatile shot into a reliable one.
Plus, Ironstorm vehicles can heal D3 wounds per turn, which enhances that zombie factor.
Over a 3-turn engagement, which is standard for a central objective anchor, the Repulsor can recover anywhere from 3 to 9 wounds. Since it only has 16 wounds to start with, healing D3 wounds per turn means that over the game, you can potentially restore over 50% of the chassis' starting wounds.
That's insane.
This takes an already difficult-to-kill asset and makes it even more tedious for the opponent to remove. It forces true overkill and excessive resource allocation.
What's fascinating here is how the choice of detachment refines the Repulsor's role. Firestorm makes it an aggressive delivery mechanism and counterpuncher, emphasizing the hybrid nature. Ironstorm makes it the ultimate stubborn objective anchor, healing, re-rolling bunker that maximizes the T12 durability.
That's it, exactly.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Let's bring this reconstruction home with the final metadata brief on the Repulsor's true role reality.
The forensic reconstruction is complete, and the Repulsor is definitively not a tank hunter. If you expect it to reliably one-shot enemy heavy armor, you will be disappointed and you will lose games.
So its true function is defined by its discounted offensive stats and its utility. It is a durable, midboard, anchor hybrid area denial platform.
Its primary purpose is tactical and psychological. It sits on a central objective, provides a T12 stat check that immediately demands a disproportionate resource commitment from the opponent. It acts as a mobile bunker, protecting high-value, fragile infantry like Hellblasters or aggressors from both ranged fire and, crucially, melee assault via that unique Emergency Combat Embarkation ability.
The competitive niche, then, is conditional. It's an A-tier asset only when deployed within specific vehicle-focused attachments like Ironstorm or Firestorm.
Right, where the external rules and stratagems can offset its weak shooting and maximize its durability and utility.
And the value proposition is crystal clear. The Repulsor's true value is not found in the 3.57 average damage it deals, but in the extra turns of shooting it guarantees to the hundreds of points of units it transports and protects.
The Repulsor is a tool for controlling the game's tempo. If you play it according to the flavor text, you lose. If you play it as a discounted T12 block of points that denies charges, you win the war of attrition.
This has been a fascinating journey, taking a unit described by raw brute force and finding that its brute force is entirely statistical and defensive. If you are fielding the Repulsor, ignore the volatile Las-talon damage roll. Remember 3 key stats: Toughness 12, 16 wounds, and the Emergency Combat Embarkation ability.
That's it.
The unit is mathematically efficient when used as a defensive delivery system and a mid-board bully, not an offensive weapon.
The Repulsor is a statistical anomaly. A powerful hybrid chassis priced significantly lower than its theoretical component parts, solely because its offensive output is unstable. It's a deliberate design trade-off that savvy players must exploit.
That makes you really think about how we evaluate units across the entire game, moving past the flashiest guns and straight to the ledger.
Exactly. And if the Repulsor is successful because its T-12-16W profile costs significantly less than its theoretical component parts, and because it controls the enemy's movement phase, this raises an important question for you, the listener.
What's that?
How might you reevaluate other underutilized, high-toughness transport vehicles across all factions in the current meta based purely on their points-per-wound ratio and ability to control the movement phase, rather than their often disappointing offensive output?
Interesting.
It might be time to ignore the guns on those forgotten transports and focus entirely on the cost of the chassis itself and what it can shield.
Food for thought indeed. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.